The other nice thing about doing these videos sometimes is I get to look at the beard in the camera and go, it's time for a trim. And it's time for a trim. UFC Blaydes versus Daukaus. The continuing making up of the canceled events from the pandemic. This one in Columbus, Ohio, coming up on tomorrow, March 26th, 4 p.m. Eastern, apparently, is the start time. So we got a good card. It's got a relevant, interesting main event. Co-main event's also interesting and again relevant. Fantastic action fight between Bryan and Barbarena. Notable fights between Askarov and France. Very relevant fight between Jennifer Maia and Manon Fiorot, and David Dvorak and Matthias Nikolao. And just some good, fun stuff. Slavkov's on the card. He's very exciting. Doesn't really fail to. And I'm actually really interested in Dadaan Baturelle versus Chris Gutierrez. I think that's gonna be a fantastic fight as well. On I don't know if it's gonna be fantastic in the cage, but it's gonna be fantastic chess match, which I'm very intrigued in. I will say the fight card is structured pretty damn terribly, though. And the reason I say that is there are two fights very, very low on the card. Second fight of the night, Dvorak, Nikolao. Third fight, Maia and Fiorot. And these are two fights that I mentioned were very key to their respective divisions. Dvorak and Nikolao are both top 10 fighters at men's 125. I am not 100% sure what the women's flyweight rankings look like. Fiorot is 13th, and Maia's got to be pretty high. Is Maia not ranked? There she is, number 4. So 4 versus 13, 2 top 10 flyweights. And it's not that they're just on the prelim card. They're buried on the prelim card, despite the fact that, well, they are certainly not number 1 contender fights. The winner of Dvorak and Nikolao is going to be in the title picture. And if Fiorot defeats Jennifer Maia, it means a big thing about her being in the title picture. And these are buried fights. It's insane. The UFC hates the 125-pound division for some reason. And someone will be like, Mia, why does this matter? Why does it matter that these fights are not being showcased? Because the UFC tends to come up with reasons why these divisions are failures and put it on the champions. This happened with Demetrius Johnson for a long time. They trotted out, Demetrius Johnson's boring. He's fighting fighters that, or his fights aren't interesting. Of course, they're not interesting. Almost all of his title contenders, save Joe Benavidez, would come from fight past prelims to fight for the title. We're repeating that same mistake here. Although these ones are on ESPN prelims. But I think the numbers show prelims a lot less watched than the main card. You want to hype someone up for a title shot, you don't put them on the prelims. And Manafiro is the most interesting 125 contender that there is right now. I think all the hardcores are in agreement on this. And like I said, well, Nikolao and Dvorak aren't talking about a title shot right now. The winner of this fight is very much in the mix. And, well, it's not going to happen in the way that it should. Anyways, let's get into the fights. Curtis Blaydes versus Chris Daukaus. Interesting fight. Obviously very relevant. Two guys that are top 10 ranked. Blaydes is always in a weird place where he's probably going to be perpetually in title shot contention without getting a title shot until Francis loses the belt because he's lost to Francis twice. I have to take him here. I think that Daukaus has two ways of fighting. One is a sort of reckless first round finisher that we saw when he first came into the UFC, where he's going to come out, he's going to swing for the fences, he's going to do his thing. That leaves him open to getting taken down pretty well, and Blaydes is pretty durable despite the knockout losses to Francis Ngannou and Derek Lewis. They're inhumanly hard hitters. I see that leading to a lot of takedowns and maybe a finish on the ground, maybe not. And the second way Daukaus has to fight is more mindful of the takedown, but where he is much, much, much less effective, in my opinion, because I don't think he actually has the depth of technical ability as a pocket boxer to actually win fights with his more cautious approach, even if it's something that I think he has to develop if he's going to be a long-term fixture at the top of the division. Um, but it's something I think that is a little too work in progress to count on here. So I am going with Curious Blaydes. Superior wrestling. To be honest, kind of a superior striker in terms of technical depth. Just not necessarily as fast as explosive as Daukaus can be. Joanne Wood versus Alexa Grasso. I was always kind of worried when Grasso went up to women's flyweight because a lot of her game at strawweight had to do with her superior range. Being a 5'5" women's strawweight it's a big deal. It's massive. But she did have issues with making the weight, and she's been on 2-0 since moving up in weight class. So I think it's gone pretty well. Her style does seem to have translated very, very well. She's still able to keep the range pretty well. She's faster, I think. And she's pretty solidly deep technical. She's 28 years old, so she's still, in theory, getting better and improving. And I really like JoJo Wood, but I think we're at the end of the line. Not that she should retire or she's done, but I mean, we're at the end of the line of her being in the title consideration picture. She is 36 years old. Certain problems with her fight game that have been there kind of since day one are still there. She's still not very good at footwork. She can have the cage cut off. She can be backed into the cage. She isn't necessarily great at taking the initiative with her footwork. She is still surprisingly good in the clinch. She's still a good volume kickboxer. But there's not a huge amount of power there. And that's the problem, is I think that realistically, Grasso, who's, I said that, questions about how her reach is going to play out at flyweight. She is the longer fighter. JoJo's also a fighter who came up from strawweight. And I think she's got faster hands. I think she's got the better footwork. I think she's the better range striker. I do think JoJo is better in the clinch if she could force that fight to be there. But Grasso is not in any way helpless in the clinch. It's not like that's going to be a safety net of domination for JoJo. And JoJo has never been a tremendously dynamic takedown threat. I don't think she can utilize the Carlos Barza game plan. So, going with Grasso to win this fight. Although, I mean, I'm always cheering for JoJo. Matt Brown, Bryan Barbarena. Fascinating fight. Not super relevant. It's kind of weird that Barbarena, in a very real way, is kind of going through what Matt Brown has gone through a number of times. Where it looks like he's done, and then Brown is suddenly reinvigorated and rises like a phoenix from the ashes, and Barbarena is only 32 years old, so do I believe he's done? He looked really bad in the Jason Witt fight, and it didn't get a lot better in the Weeks fight. It just feels like he's fallen off a cliff in terms of physicality, in terms of his durability, in terms of his cardio, even. And that's really problematic from a guy who, if we're being completely honest, the hallmarks of his game are cardio and durability. I'm going to go with a 41-year-old Matt Brown to be less washed than a 32-year-old Bryan Barbarena, and that sounds very silly. But I said it was kind of the end of the road for JoJo as a main title contender. Might be the end of the road for Bryan Barbarena just as even an action fighter. Just it's just been very bad lately. I'm hoping I'm wrong because I'm a big Barbarena fan. I enjoy a lot of his fights. You look at his UFC run, and there are some amazingly fun fights there. Um, the Vincente Luque fight forever is going to be amazing. His fight with Randy Brown, so much fun. But I'm just worried about I'm worried that the things that made him a competitive fighter are not there. Um, this one might be worth betting. No, they're near even odds. I guess it's not worth betting on. But yeah, I'm going with Matt Brown. Askar Askarov, Kai Kara France. Going with Askar Askarov. The reason being is there's a lot of good things about Kai Kara France. So I don't want to come off as dismissive of his talents. Because I think he's a top flyweight, ranked number 5 right now according to Topology. He's probably higher on the UFC's rankings, if we're being completely honest. Let's see here. No, 6. He's one above Matthias Nikolao. Matthias Nikolao's buried on the undercard. Go freaking figure. I'm sorry, I'm still salty about that. But there are significant flaws in Kai Kara France's game in the sense that it's pretty incomplete. He can be wrestled. He can be outgrappled. He is a good counterfighter. He is powerful, but that kind of encompasses his game. And at flyweight, I just don't think that's I don't think it's enough. So I'm going to go with Askarov to win this fight here, through pressure boxing, into wrestling, out grappling him. I don't know if he's going to finish him. I've never been super impressed with Askarov as a finisher. Also, I don't think he has not had a single finish in the UFC. Was finishing a bunch of people on the regional scene, but we know that doesn't necessarily mean a ton. Does have a good rear naked choke game, but I don't know. Kai Kara France probably makes the distance. I mean, yes, he got submitted by Brandon Royval, but Brandon Royval is, I think, a very uniquely insane challenge. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Askarov by decision. Just out grapple, out wrestle, probably even out volume strike Kai Kara France, although France's strikes are much more impactful. We make it to a fight that I think has no business being on the main card, especially given the two that are not. Alexei Olenek versus Ilir Latifi. I'm going with Ilir Latifi. The reason is pretty simple. How do you choke Ilir Latifi? The man has no neck. And also Olenek's cardio, durability, basically everything is kind of falling. He's 44 years old. Yes, it's heavyweight. Yes, you can fight beyond 44 at heavyweight. But I think we're done with Olenek beating like particularly good fighters, if we're being honest. Excuse me. It's early in the morning. My apologies. Yeah, I think the win over Fabricio Verdum, which really raised his stock, has put him in a class with people who are just that he's just not going to have answers for. And this is one of those fights. Mark Diakesi versus Slavoklas Vyacheslav Borishev. I'm going with Borishev. So Diakesi, I had this speech about Pickett a couple of months ago, JB Pickett, maybe even like a month ago, where you have someone who's got all the physical tools that you would want to see in an MMA fighter, but none of the mental calmness, nerve conquering ability that is needed. And it's It's one of those things where like I don't really even particularly understand why someone is fighting who is that uncomfortable in the cage, and that's Diakasi. I think it came off as reckless aggression in his earlier fights, and it worked because he was so physically imposing. But once he hit the UFC, I think it came out as what it was, that he's exceptionally nervous, and that his technical well is pretty shallow. It's been getting deeper, but it's shallow. I think he's going to have his moments in this fight because Borishev, I think, is always going to give someone moments because he's a mess from a wrestling standpoint. It's kind of weird that he's training at Team Alpha Male and is a mess from a wrestling standpoint. But he's a good scrambler. He can get out from under people. Even if Diakasi gets him to the ground, I think he can get back to his feet. I think that while he's not necessarily even leaps and bounds better as a striker, he's leaps and bounds better in terms of how much he is, for lack of a better term, enjoying himself in exchanges. And he's also got a lot of physical gifts. So I'm taking Slaviclaws. Trying to remember if Diakasi's been knocked out. And the answer is no. He's lost by decision to Klosa, Hakparast, and Fiziev. Yeah, okay, he went to decision with Fiziev. Yeah, I'm not picking Borishev to finish him. So Slaviclaws by decision. Neil Magni versus Max Griffin. Neil Magni is always a simple question. And I don't mean this as an insult because a lot of the times people can't answer that simple question. And what that question is can you take a simple can you face off with Magni's jab and not feel like you have to clinch with this 80-inch reach? Because Neil Magny sucks the life out of you in the clinch. Max Griffin tends to be too willing to go to the clinch. Actually, the weird thing is that with his low kick game and his range game, I think Max Griffin has the answers to the question. I just don't think he's going to take them. Because he's always viewed the clinch as a place where he can win the fight. I don't think he can here. So, taking Magny by decision. I'm kind of hoping to be wrong because, I mean, even though it's kind of weird to say this because Griffin's the older fighter at 36 years old, Magny's 34. He'd be a breath of fresh air into like the top 15. Like we've seen, the book on where Magny fits in the division is very well written. Basically, he's beaten who he's going to beat. He's lost to who he's going to lose to. And there's not really much more to see from that regard. Like almost falling down the ranks would give some fresher opponents and stuff. And Max Griffin taking his place would introduce some new variables to welterweight. I don't think it's going to happen though. So I've got Magni. Sarah Mcmahon versus Carol Hosa. This is another case actually of someone who is incredibly physically gifted. Sarah McMahon is amazingly physically gifted. She's incredibly strong. Her single strike punches are crisp, impactful, fast. Despite being 41 years old, she seems to still have plenty of cardio. But is again, like Diakasi, a very, very nervous fighter. Big old bag of nerves. I'm going with Carol Hosa to win the fight because she's the type of fighter who I think can break those nerves. We've seen a number of other fighters do it who fight somewhat similar to Hosa. I think there's going to be definitely moments where Sarah McMahon controls this fight. I think she's even going to win a round, maybe even two. But I think at some point she's going to give up her back and get submitted by Carol Hosa. I really think Hosa has a pretty good future in this division. It's quite good. She's not normally a finisher. I guess that would be the one thing to go against that rear naked choke idea. But it's just that Sarah McMahon gives you opportunities to submit her at an alarming rate. Pardon me. And I do think it'll happen here. Dadaan Baturelle versus Chris Gutierrez. I talked about this one as being very, very interesting. Part of me thinks it's actually a bad idea because it is two fundamentally counter fighters fighting each other, and that can often go very, very wrong. But Baturelle is a pressure counter fighter. What that means is that, well, he does his best work with counters, with a subtle feint game that makes you commit to things that allows him to counter. He's not just a counter fighter. He will come forward. He's actually probably at his most comfortable coming forward and countering you. So I think he will come to Gutierrez. He will give Gutierrez a chance to implement his own counter game. And he will implement his own counter game. And it's going to be fascinating, I think. I think Baturelle will start way better. Gutierrez is a very slow starter. He likes to get reads. He likes to dissect the opponent and figure out where his counters are going to be best, what he can neutralize, what he has to deal with, what he has to avoid, that kind of thing. Very cerebral fighter in that regard. But it basically probably will give the first round to Baturelle. And I think Baturelle has enough diversity, enough change to his game that even after Gutierrez gets calibrated, it's going to be a fairly close fight. And I think that if you have the big first round and the rest is close, I think the judges will give it the nod. This would be Baturelle's biggest win in the UFC, I would have to say, because I mean, Guido Canetti has all kinds of flaws. Kevin Dadaan probably isn't UFC caliber. Brandon Davis probably isn't as well. But Dana White loves that guy. Is Davis on contract? He's not booked to do anything. Not sure. I don't know. Oh yeah, he just came back for that fight, right? Gulf Coast MMA. So yeah, he probably is still around. Yeah, so I'm going with Baturelle to have that big first round, and that to just kind of be enough to maybe take away the fact that he might lose rounds 2 and 3, but a judge will still give him one of those rounds, give him the fight. Then we have Alec, Chob, Kisuria versus Dennis Tulin. I do not really know Tulin. I did look him up when I saw this fight on the card. He looks like a complete mess. And Kisuria looks like a good wrestler, kind of like, I don't want to say Habib, because he's not Habib, but that style of fighter, that I don't think he's even Dagestani, but that stereotype, prototype, there you go, fighter. I do worry about, like, he's 5'9" and fighting at middleweight. Like, 170 better be part of his game plan. Because he is going to get overpowered at some point. It's just Tulin is so much of a mess that won't happen. So, yeah, Kisuria. Oh, I'm just looking at Tulin here. Does he tend to lose by decision or does he tend to lose by submission? A little bit of both. Interesting. Do I think Kisuria gets the finish? Also, why is a Russian fighter taking this on short notice? You think they would have found someone from the Ohio area to take this fight? Let's go rear naked choke, but I could see that also going to decision. Maddon Furo, Jennifer Maia, the classically misplaced card here, or fight on this card, because, I mean, realistically, if Furo wins this fight, you could justify giving her a title shot, or at the very least, moving her to one fight away from a title shot, and it's the third fight of the night. I'm sorry. I can't get over that. I will say, number one here, I'm seeing Jennifer Maia at like plus 300, even plus 400 odds. if you can get those odds, it might be worth a bet because I don't think she should ever be that low. Outside of this is the woman who did take a round off Shevchenko, which they love hyping about. Is Maya particularly amazing? The answer is no. She lost to Caitlin Chukagian. Fiorot is a way more physically imposing version of Chukagian, I think. So, no, I do very much believe that Fiorot is going to come out here, control the range, outstrike Maya, but Maya is exceptionally tough. She does adjust. She does change as the fight goes on. She does have some skills. She is by far the best fighter that Fiorot has fought because Fiorot has been given the soft touch treatment so far, which is not bad. When I say that, I don't mean it's bad. It's kind of like when I say Conor McGregor was given stylistically friendly matchups that paid off more than they were really worth. It's good. That's how you build hype. That's how you build someone to get excited about. And Victoria Leonardo, Tabitha Ricci, and Mayra Bueno Silva all are pretty incomplete fighters. Or in the case of Leonardo, who isn't necessarily incomplete, just very unphysical. And yeah, here she is against Maya, who is a very big step up. But I think it's one that she'll fast with flying colors and move on to the next challenge. David Dvorak versus Matthias Nikolao. I am going with Matthias Nikolao, despite the fact that I always feel like he is not really suited to flyweight. That his somewhat low pace counter based style is always going to hit a ceiling. But I do believe that Dvorak is not necessarily diverse enough to take advantage of that. And we're going to see Nikolao land some good counters, maybe mix in some grappling because he is actually a very capable grappler. And kind of just out physical Dvorak in close because I think Dvorak is vulnerable to being bullied in the clinch. So I'm going with Nikolao, which sounds like this is a really uninteresting fight. It's really not. I think it's going to be a fantastic, fascinating fight to watch. It's just not one that I can go super deep into the reasons vocally. And then finally, we finish off with Bruno Souza versus Luis Saldana. As much as I do not believe in Bruno Souza, I really don't believe in Luis Saldana. He is a mess of reckless abandon and defensive lapses, and Souza's probably going to submit him. There you go. So that's the fight card. Like I said, it's pretty interesting. It's just poorly built. It's this classic problem of like the UFC. I don't know what it is. They hate 125, be it men's or women's, and they just sacrifice the division repetitively. I don't know if they just didn't want 125 fights to dominate the entire card because you do have a women's and a men's 125-pound fight on the main card. But then don't book them for this card. Book them for the next card. It's not like anyone's like from Ohio here. In those fights, like Askarov, Kai Kara-France, Jojo Wood, Alexa Grasso, Nikolao, Dvorak, none of them are even American. It's 8 foreign fighters. The only one that I think trains in the States is Jojo. So yeah, I don't get it. I don't understand. People say the UFC is really good at promoting. I've always had the opposite opinion that their promotion is almost entirely positionally based. We are the best fighting promotion in the league, or in the world. If you like fights, you watch us, and that's about it. They tend not to really build stars, and they tend to actually sacrifice their own divisions like a solid half the time. And yeah, I don't know. Anyways, other than that, we got the Colby Covington, George Masvidal shit. Masvidal pleading not guilty at his arraignment. MMA Twitter is going nuts about that. They're very angry about it, which is weird. They're like, you should have just pled guilty. I'm like, no one pleads guilty at arraignment. There's no deal on the table. There's no reason to plead guilty at that point. Like, I think he will be found guilty. Like, I think the evidence is starkly that he, is indeed the guy that assaulted Covington, and that Covington was indeed assaulted. That being said, I'm also not really fond of these, like, Colby Covington super supporters who are like, man, you can't victim blame Colby for this. Yes, we can. If I go outside now and talk shit about my neighbor's kids or whatever, their parenting abilities, and they flatline me, I have been assaulted, but I have also provoked it. Like, that is essentially what Colby Covington did. Like, honestly, the fact that Covington's shtick has not resulted in worse than this at some point amazes me. Anyways, that's the fight card. That's the scummy news of the week, and I will see you next week.